My kids put me in a home, so I put my money somewhere they can't find. It started with a lie, one that wore a polite smile and came wrapped in the soft language of what's best for you. They said the house was too big, the stairs too steep, the world too dangerous. They said I needed care, routine, safety. What they didn't say was that they wanted control. Of my life. Of my things. Of my money. They took my keys. They emptied my home. They signed the papers, wheeled me into a spotless senior facility, and called it love. But love doesn't feel like betrayal. Love doesn't lock your bank accounts under guardianship while you're still breathing. I kept quiet. I let them think they'd won. I let them believe the old man who once slept on a park bench, who built a business from scrap metal and vending machines, had finally lost his grip. But they didn't know that the same silence they mistook for weakness was strategy. Years ago, when my wife passed and the walls of our home echoed too loudly, I started preparing. Not for death, but for legacy. I read. I studied. I met people who didn't wear suits but held more power than those who did. I listened to stories from billionaires who never smiled for cameras and never signed anything in their real names. And I learned one thing. Visibility is vulnerability. So I moved the money. Not to a bank account they could find.
Not to a trust they could challenge.
But to a decentralized asset pool. Crypto, metals, and silent partnerships spread across 4 countries and 5 identities. I kept the paperwork locked in a safe behind drywall in my old house's basement. The house they thought they'd sold without asking me. What they didn't know. I bought it back 6 months ago. Under a shell corporation.
Cash.
But back to the home. It wasn't cruel. It was staged. Bright walls, smiling staff, bingo nights. But it reeked of abandonment. I wasn't allowed to drive. My calls were monitored. My mail was forwarded to my eldest son's house. The same son who once cried when I taught him to ride a bike. The same one now checking if I had updated my will. The only person who treated me like I still mattered was the janitor. A quiet, young man who recognized my name, not from my kids' stories, but from an old startup I once backed in secret. We talked. I asked questions. He answered honestly. He became my eyes, my ears, my bridge to the outside world. And the day I found out they tried to access my online portfolio, that was the day I made the final move. I transferred the last chunk, not to a bank, but to a community, one I had quietly been building for the past 5 years. A sustainable village, off-grid, solar-powered, food-secure, where the forgotten could thrive. Veterans, widows, children who aged out of foster care. A place built not from guilt, but from clarity. I named it after my wife. But I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Weeks later, my kids showed up. Smiling. Casual. They said they were thinking of downsizing the facility. That maybe I could contribute more from my remaining assets. They brought papers. I asked for tea. While they waited, I stepped out. Not through the front door, but through the back, into the waiting car of the janitor who had long since become my legal aid. We drove past the gates, past the city, toward the hills, where the air smelled like eucalyptus and freedom. I moved in that night, into a cabin I helped design, with books on the shelf and letters from people whose lives I had touched without them knowing who I was. The next morning, the headlines hit. Anonymous investor funds fully sustainable off-grid community for displaced seniors and forgotten veterans. My kids tried to call. I didn't answer, but I did send a postcard. It read, "Asterisk, you put me where you thought I'd disappear. I put my money where it could never be misused. Not by you. Not by anyone. Asterisk. Asterisk legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you protect while you're still here. Asterisk."